Hello, presentation. United States of America, required equity return to reach an 8% all-in return. It was a bit quick. Across the top there, required equity return to reach an 8% all-in return. This is the standard balanced portfolio of 60% equity, 40% bonds, and the industry norm for pension funds is to hit 8%, 8%, 8% per year. Has been for a long time, and they're holding on to that. This goes back to 1976, and we can see where it drops down to its lowest in 1981. That was when interest rates were the highest and therefore bond rates were the highest, which meant the equity portion of the balance portfolio only needed to hit 2% for the year of 1981, because the rest was taken up in the bond gain. But ever since, the trend, not being your friend, has made strains on the equity side go up and up and up and up, and now it is at 12%. Where bonds are at the moment, the equity side, the 60% of the balance portfolio, has to hit 12% every year. 12%, 12%, 12% to make the industry norm of 8% appear. You going to bet on that? You're silly if you do. Talking about silly people, this is the US Consumer Research Center Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index, and I think they're probably getting it wrong again, like they did early in 2010 and early in 2011. The Conference Board Consumer Confidence Index is up across just about all its numbers, but consumers aren't the brightest buttons in the box. Calculated risk gives us durable goods orders decline 4% in January, which is monstrously horrible, but there are actual reasons for it. I'll read the opening paragraph to get us a couple of reasons. Durable goods is always very volatile. Durable goods orders were expected to decline due to lower aircraft orders. I'd spoken about this. Non-defence aircraft and parts declined 19%, and the expiration of a tax credit that allowed for faster depreciation of equipment purchases, a tax bonus that has fallen off. That will go into Q1 GDP and be quite a bad hit. We would want that volatility to go volatile on the positive side for the next 2 months, or the first quarter is going to show the consumer confidence are wrong again. This is from the New York Times. To pay New York pension funds, cities borrow from it first. That's Patterson, isn't it? Albany. When New York state officials agreed to allow local governments to use an unusual borrowing plan to put off a portion of their pensions obligations, fiscal watchdogs scoffed at the arrangement, calling it irresponsible and unwise. Scoff. And now their fears are being realized. Cities throughout the state, wealthy towns such as Southampton, East Hampton, counties like Nassau and Suffolk, and other public employers like Westchester Medical Center and the New York Public Library are all managing their rising pension bills by borrowing from the very same $140 billion pension fund to which they owe the money. How do we think this will end? I think the watchdogs should do more than just go scoff. And meanwhile, the Case-Shiller Composite Index, going back to 1987 here, the great big hump of the housing boom, took another dip down. And that's not good. That will eventually get itself under the skin of the consumer. I'm going to read this because I try to ignore as much as possible what's going on in the Republican race to be the GOP candidate to go against Obama. Is it still too late for Obama to put Hillary in? Probably. Anyway, I'll read this, and it just seems to me, the little bits that do get through, what shocking nonsense these people talk, and anybody that believes in them or backs them is either stupid or they've just got a damn good reason why they're backing these people, and that'd be a selfish reason. I'll read this, some of it, indented into the top paragraph for a bit. However, today's growing disparity between the rich and poor is one of the critical social dilemmas we face in the 21st century. I believe that the growing wealth gap is one of the key reasons for this increasing disparity. And you know, you're dealing with a person with a really quite big brain capacity when the disparity between rich and poor, he believes, it's a he, that the growing wealth gap is one of the key reasons for the gap. And this is written down, so, you know, he's had time to think about this. Despite a strong economy through the 1990s, the gap between the rich and the poor expanded. Among Americans who reach age 70, the top 10% own more wealth than the bottom 90%. How do we address this inequity as well, probably? Do we restrain those at the top? No. The answer lies in strengthening the asset base of the remaining 90%, especially those at the bottom of the income scale. Increased income is one way for families and communities to climb out of poverty. Wealth creation is another. Wealth allows for ownership, fosters self-reliance and independence. It creates jobs. Wealth, in turn, creates more wealth. Initiatives that encourage individual wealth creation are imperative to closing the gap between the rich and poor. I believe the government can play a role in helping many Americans who struggle to enter the economic mainstream. That's Rick Santorum 10 years ago. So there's a bit of trickle down there. Leave the rich people alone and help up the poor people to be rich and wealthy like the rich and wealthy. Absolute nonsense, the lot of it. I mean, they really don't have a clue, do they, these people? They have no vision, no picture of what to do except to help the people that are paying for their elections. This super PAC stuff, and just going back to Citizens United, which must be, if we're talking about politics, that's an over the peak. As soon as the United States went over Citizens United peak, it's all the way down since then, and will continue going down at an accelerating, exponential rate. Over in Europe, Paul Krugman, New York Times, finally, let's look at balance of payments. He's looked at other reasons why countries, the pegs, were so piggy in their troughs, and has found the current account deficit, which is the balance of payments, difference between exports and imports, put simply, and the average current account balance 1999 to 2007, and your pig if you're in red, or the reds are in pigs, whatever. And Estonia, sticky down a lot, imported a lot more than they exported, but then we get Portugal and Greece sticky down in red, Slovak Republic in blue, but they're small, we don't bother about them, Spain, Slovenia in blue because they're not a pig, and then Ireland and Italy. Basically you're starting to get into the pigsty when your balance of payments goes all wonky. In other words, you're importing more than you're exporting. It's nothing in particular, it's just a little red flag to say, are you sure you've got your economy right when you're consistently importing more than you're exporting. And it shows for European countries that are trapped in a European currency that they don't print themselves, that you can't continue doing this sort of thing. In the old days, the gold standard would have taken care of that automatically, but there is no gold standard anymore, except for some of the constrictions like a gold standard that a common currency puts on these European euro using countries. I'll finish with this, just the headline. The article's typical Wolfgang Munchau. Greece really needs a year to prepare for total default. And this is kind of the air that I get from so many of these different bits of information coming in. Everyone wants a rest. They think that if they can have just a rest from paying these debts, then they'll really be able to, in that year, shake themselves together and get themselves onto a decent financial footing that then they will be able to go on and pay their debts. Or in the case of Greece, realise just how much you do have to default, and then after defaulting so much, then can you build and go on into the future. Everybody is tired and wants a rest of all these debts, but unfortunately the great powers that are out there say no rest, debts must be paid, and pay them, pay them, pay them, pay them. And that is the great grinding thing that is grinding down the world economy. It's absolutely overwhelmed with debt, and there will be no rest from it. No planning, no getting out of it. The debt that's written will be paid. On the understanding, they say, that if we start being lenient and letting a few people off, it'll just be a domino effect and everyone will want to be let off. And then, well, society unravels. So they keep the pressure on and will take an awful lot of your pain. You can be put in an awful lot of pain and they won't mind, because they are defending civil social society. So pay up. Bye.